Georgia and the Georgian people have never been unfamiliar with war. The history of the Georgian nation is accompanied by the history of wars too. Georgians were either at war or engaged in agriculture for centuries. That is the reason why one of the symbols of Georgia is the monumental statue of Mother of Kartli, erected on Sololaki mountain in Tbilisi 1,500 years after the foundation of the capital. Author Elguja Amashukeli, 1966, who holds a sword in one hand in order to attack the enemy and the chalice of wine in the other to meet gas. This monument, which has become a symbol of Tbilisi, accurately expresses the history and character of the Georgian nation. Theater reflects life, but wars prevented the theater from functioning. In 1795, the Georgian king Erekle II was defeated by the Iranian Shah Aga Mohammad Khan in the Battle of Ksanisi. On the front line at war, there were Georgian theater figures who encouraged the warriors and fought too. Almost all the actors died in this war. That's why it took half a century to restore the Georgian theater. Today, in the old districts of Tbilisi, there is a memorial to the Georgian actors who died in the Ksanisi War, 1795. Since then, Georgia has gone through many wars, and the theme of war and emigration has been a leitmotif in the repertoire of the Georgian theater because it has become a part of the Georgian people's life. Even today, in the 21st century, the war does not lose its relevance, and the Georgian people have lived with it since the day of gaining independence. Today, 20% of Georgia's territory is occupied by Russia. The War of August 2008 deprived Georgia of dozens of villages and turned its citizens into IDPs in their own country. Even today, the ghost of the war lives near the occupation line. The war has not gone anywhere, and people live in anticipation of stirring up the cayenned embers. The directors of the new generation, who were born in the period of wars, social hardships, and general stress, have experienced everything what they later reflected in their plays, not only as a childhood nightmare, as a ghost of the past, but as modernity, the real situation of today. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the directors born in independent Georgia after 1991 show us the inheritance of the previous century on stage and analyze the results that they themselves experienced. The war, the era they inherited, and the city that greeted them became a personal trauma for them and for the entire generation. War, era, and city became the main concerns of the new generation of directors. To talk about acute problems, they turn to documentary sources, search and find people who have survived the war, and the new original theater text is created based on their story. In the latest Georgian theater, for the directors of the new generation, verbatim has become the most convenient and successful way to communicate with the audience in order to convey the problem with more intensity, drama, and realism. Post-war traumatic experiences were reflected in Deta Tavadze's play Women of Troy, performed at Royal District Theatre in 2013. 3 years later, in 2016, the same creative group at the same theatre presented the audience Prometheus 25 Years of Independence, which depicts the era from Georgia's independence, 1991, to the present day, and in 2018, David Korbaladze and Mikhail Charkviani performed Dead Cities, which describes the life of cities devoid of life. In 2022, a few days after the start of the war in Ukraine, Deta Tavadze's premiere, Mother War, was held at Ozurgeti Theatre, which was staged by the young director Saba Aslamazishvili. In February 2022, the Sandro Akhmeteli Theatre in Tbilisi offered the audience the play Bad Roads by Irakli Gogia, which was written by contemporary Ukrainian playwright Natalia Vorozhbits based on the script Bad Roads. All the listed performances are according to the plays of modern playwrights and staged by young directors both at the capital and regional theaters. Women of Troy by the Tatavadze and the Togabunia is not only the best recognized work, but also one of the best productions performed in the latest Georgian theatre, which has been in the active repertoire of the Royal District Theatre for many years. David Gabunia worked on the collage text of the play, and it's not only a new edition of Euripides. The Trojan women, only its one fragment is used in it. The group of authors of the play created a completely new text for the play based on a documentary sources and memories of women who went to war. At the same time, the playwright used fragments of text by Kawabata, Wilde, and Bond. In the play, only women speak about the war and the mourning caused by the war, and they are portrayed as spiritually strong, with great inner strengths. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, war has become a way of life, which we often forget, and therefore we do not know how to talk about mourning. This question is asked repeatedly in the play, but they still tell about mourning, with pain and feeling. In the play Women of Troy, three main lines were highlighted: war, mourning, and women. In 2016, on the 25th anniversary of Georgia's independence, the same group premiered a new play, Prometheus 25 Years of Independence. The Tatovadze and the Togabunia's joint play research is based on fragments, memories, and associations of 25 years history of Georgia's independence. The performance becomes a single chain of documentary, maternal, and literary text and acquired the form of destructive play. Moreover, that's over theatrical texts. As in Women of Troy, the creative team offered us a mix of documentary and artistic texts. The play uses not only fragments of Aeschylus' tragedies, but also texts by Howard Barker, Augusto Boal, and Franz Kafka. The play is based on the actors' real stories and the narration. The characters at the gained independence of Georgia are peers. Their biography is the history of independence Georgia. The young actors of Royal District Theatre tell important details of their biographies and those of their generations, which are closely intertwined. As the Georgian critic Tamar Bokuchava wrote, the performance is a kind of civil manifesto of the young troupe, which appreciates 25 years of experience. At the same time, it's a reflection on the nature and essence of life. Theater, culture, man, youth, the chain of discoveries and disappointments that accompanies the process of growing up. The play revealed the vision of the independent Georgian generation on the era, their attitudes toward the history of independence. The reality, which became an artistic fiction in the play, is mutilated as well as their life. Imagination about the homeland, the era. Patches of history gradually enter the play, old and familiar, seemingly insignificant stories, turning into an epic story that describes the Georgian story of national movement, displacement, civil war, blackmail, hunger, and violence. Together with the characters of the play, the audience has also remembers the rebirths of their own and their homeland, the era, pain, joy, almost all sensations and feelings come alive into the minds of the audience and onto the stage. The sign of equality between the country and the generation becomes more intense. The suffering of the generation equals the suffering of the country. It seems that these two phrases, remember and forget, follows the whole play as a refrain. The play Dead Cities, staged by Mikhail Charkviani at Poti Drama Theatre in 2018, tells about the tragic fate of dead and half-empty cities. The play was created by the young playwright and director Bait Korbaladze, based on the stories of the actors and residents of the town of Poti. The problems posed in the play are generalized and gain a global scale. The authors tell the story of abandoned, ruined, lifeless cities, which were handed down from the older generation to the younger one during the period of independence. The director talks to us about the problems of dead cities and awakens a dormant sense of civic activity in us. The spectrum of problems also includes the inert civil society, which is called to talk about problems. The director tries to find a way out, and with this deeply social play, he concludes through research that talking always makes sense, even if you think you can't change anything just by talking. Director Lasha Chkhartishvili came up with an original, in the universal sense of word, scenic solution of the original text, which brought the message and the form of its delivery into a synthesis and gave the audience a real catharsis. He placed the audience in a vicious circle in which the actors, as citizens, became individuals and locked in the circle. The circle rotates, the characters of the performance change places, but the public, the audience, remains in one place, just like the artist returned to the original location. It's a vicious and unbreakable circle, a kind of wheel of fate that travels through space and time and brings everyone back to the straight point. Actor, director, and playwright Tatavadze started working and thinking on the play Mother War. In August 2008, during the Russian-Georgian War, while he was on holiday in Tsarvani and very close to the front line, traces of the author's feeling and experiences were also reflected in the play. Mother War is the winner of the 2013 Austrian-Georgian project Conversation Without Borders and New Generation play. In 2013, a theatrical reading of Mother War was organized in Kiev as part of the British-Ukrainian-Georgian project. New writing just when Russia annexed Crimea and declared a hybrid war on Ukraine. The world premiere of the play took place in 2015 in the German city Zittau, which was in the theater's active repertoire for 2 years. The first stage interpretation of Mother War in Georgia was performed by the director Saba Aslamazishvili at Ozurgeti Alexander Tutunava's Professional Drama Theatre. With this performance, the experimental space of Ozurgeti Theatre was opened. The premiere of the play was held against the backdrop of the ongoing war in Ukraine. Not only did this fact revive the world wounded of the war, but made it even more acute. Proximity to it, direct or indirect influence, and unfortunately a reminder to the audience of its severity and relevance as an eternal theme, war as a global or local event. The Tatavadze and Saba Aslamazishvili sometimes tell the story of war and people at war with humor and irony. In the play, we can see the metamorphosis of people against the backdrop of war, their degradation, their complete nakedness, their awakening of dormant complexes. People hate, betray, and detest each other, but they are still together because the war forces them to unite. And that's why they get used to and even love each other. Zina and Tina's kiss and dialogue episodes. In Saba Aslamazishvili's play, we came across different generations, war veterans and war debutants. Kindness disappears completely in people of war, and only the instinct of self-survival, selfishness dominates. People turn into beasts, like dragonflies into locusts. The Tatavadze's really outstanding metaphor is logically and emotionally played out in the play. The scientific story of the transformation of dragonflies into locusts unfolds parallel to the events of the play. In the finale, the artistic metaphor and the process of turning people into beasts intersect. The world created by scenographers Tamar Okhekian and Saba Aslamazishvili seems to be in contrast with war. It's not resolved in gray or blood color, but in motley, brighter than dark. The steep ascent which Tina Tsitsibutrukidze climbs despite many unsuccessful attempts has a symbolic and metaphorical load in the scenography. The viewer is exposed to the physical suffering from young women who is obsessed with climbing this hill because this path is the only way to survive physically. At the edge of the stage space, as if imperceptibly switched on, the television stands as a symbol of the only means of connecting with the outside world, but it has lost its function, is out of order. This connection with the world is cut off. The broadcast is turned off. One original musical theme by the composer Vakhtang Vakharia is the leitmotif of the individual episodes of the performance. The composer's music of clap sound is a music of war, which expresses the tempo rhythm of war and echoes and chaos of war. It's on this musical theme that Shorina Goetadze Manana offers us a free dance, which is a more like improvised one. It's that moment of desperation when you force yourself to still dance, still move, still live. From the stage of Tbilisi Akhmeteli Drama Theatre, they tell us true stories from a few years ago, which relate to the most urgent and occupied problem for today's world war. This is a topic that, unfortunately, is relevant now and at this moment when the war is raging in our neighboring and friendly country, Ukraine, which affects directly and indirectly. The artistic director of Akhmeteli Theatre, Irakli Gogia, performed the works consisting of several short stories by modern Ukrainian author Natalia Vorozhbits at the Georgian theater shortly after the start of the new war in Ukraine. The actors of the Akhmeteli theater who brought the chronicle of the war with its reality to the audience through documentary methods. In the course of the play, the audience is speechless, saddened, and with great attention and interest watches the stage on which the heroes of the war live in the war. It seems that the actors are not playing anything. They skillfully revive Natalia Vorozhbits' characters on stage so that they manage to involve the audience in the course of the performance until the end. Irakli Gogia's play combines several of Natalia Vorozhbits' short stories, whose stage and screen versions existed before its staging in Tbilisi. The version of Akhmeteli Theatre is radically different from them in terms of mood, form, and atmosphere. At the edges of the stage of Akhmeteli Theatre, there are several windows, and its depths there are iron barrels in which the fire is burning. Here we can see a dilapidated and damaged bus stop, a waiting room for passengers. The scenography is in dark tones. Also, it's implied that the environment in which the citizens of Donbass lived before the war was bright and colorful, but the war here together with the people changed everything. The creators of this atmosphere are artists Irakli Bilisashvili and Anna Kubulashvili, who meticulously and accurately convey the visual side of the war and, most importantly, the mood, which is logically combined with the tunes of the composer Miran Mirmiri's original music. Irakli Gogia shows, on the other hand, the people who were finally corrupted the war, deprived their sense of dignity, lose self-respect and integrity, but on the other hand, he shows people who care for each other, who still have the strength and ability to save themselves, restore their dignity to satisfy self-esteem. This is how the new generation sees the worst problems of the last century in the Georgian theater. The directors of the new generation create a new Georgian theater, both in terms of form and content, which is based on a new deconstructed theater text. The new generation is hurt and worried by both past and the present. The problems created by the past era do not lose their intensity and relevance even today. The war is the era in which they were born, grew up, and live in turned out to be the most degrading in this generation, and the city that was virtually empty of young people. They deal with these topics with spiritual and physical suffering, speak loudly and courageously, offer ways to solve them, but the problem, unfortunately, remains a problem.